At this point, the screaming noise, the yelling noise was way closer, and it was just so uncomfortable. Like, I'm like, this is weird, you know? When I stood up, this thing yelled down at me like it was standing above me. I mean, I thought that was it. Like, I mean, this thing was standing next to me. They're screaming, I'm screaming, like, we're freaking the crap out. The moment where I realized that we were dealing with some type of like Bigfoot is when he pushed his hand down on the tent. And that's when I looked over at my roommate Trey, and I'm like, we're deep into this. Like, we're in something here. And he's like, that's a human hand. And I'm like, that's a legitimate 5-fingered human hand. And this thing was huge. I mean, I can't describe to you the feeling of this and how absolutely terrifying it was.
Yeah, let's just jump right into it. If you don't mind introducing yourself, maybe tell a little bit about yourself and how you ended up on the internet posting your Bigfoot encounter.
So, yeah, my name is Isaiah Seiler. I'm actually originally from Oregon. Spent most of my life in the woods, all through Oregon, Montana, Colorado. Pretty aware of, of course, every animal and their sounds and all sorts of stuff. So definitely not novice in this area. But in 1999, my entire family, I have 2 brothers, 1 sister, my mom and dad, we all moved to Pensacola, Florida, so that my dad could go to college and get his pastoral degree. So that's how we got to Florida. Just kind of moved around the United States a little bit when I got out on my own. I graduated and I was in college by 16, 17 years old. So I was out on my own pretty quick, just because they raised us to be adults instead of kids. So I was pushed out of the nest a little early. But we sought off on this adventure, became Floridians, ended up marrying a local, having 5 kids. Ran my own renovation company for 10 years, and now I'm just a simple sales associate for Bass Fitter. But I was sitting there the other day, and I just honestly thinking about that story, and from time to time I think about it and just think that is absolutely the craziest experience I've ever had in my life. I told a couple people here and there, I mean, just around a campfire. That's a pretty prime story around a campfire, and just at random, but probably maybe 3 or 4 people. And then, just sitting there, and I'm like, what, I bet a lot of Bigfoot enthusiasts would want to hear this. And one of the reasons, of course, I didn't come out with it earlier was just how crazy it is. I mean, I researched, and we went online, and I mean, just really scoured the internet at that time to find other people experiencing similar things than we did. And we did find a few videos that had the same scream, which just gave us chills down our spine. But none of them really had that temperature change. So that really freaked us out. And then it was just how interactive a Bigfoot got with our campsite and our tent and all those things. And so it was definitely pretty intriguing, but yeah, I was just sitting there, and man, I'm like, I think it's time. I really, at this point, don't really care what people think about me on social media. So that's, I'm past that stage of my life. So I think that probably played a little bit into it as well, but yeah.
Take us back, man. What happened, when, where, all the good stuff.
Yeah. So it was just 3 friends and I. It was my roommate, his girlfriend, and then just a buddy of ours. And in 2005, in August, we were thinking about something to do. We all had the weekend off, and man, we just thought, what better way to spend this than just go float down Blackwater. And I don't, if any of your listeners ever been to Blackwater River, which a few of the comments on those Facebook pages really kind of gave me an idea that there's a lot of people in this area that listen. But they know Blackwater. It's just beautiful. It's so quiet, relaxing. It's just a really nice float. So we thought, what better way to experience that weekend than to go further up where you don't have as many rednecks, and because it is, we call it one of the redneck Rivieras of Florida. But we yeah, it's so much fun. But so we went up, we're like, man, that first day is going to be super relaxing. Second day, you know, we're just going to float around with other people in the river and talk and make new friends. And so we drove, I believe it was 7 miles, but I could be mistaken in the mileage, but we drove 7 miles past the main location where you put in on Blackwater River. And, you know, obviously parked a car there, and then had our cars parked in the end zone at Adventures Unlimited, which is the main location where everybody pretty much gets out of the river. And there's a kind of a little theme park thing going on over there. But yeah, or more of an adventure park. But so we set off, and we got in the water, and not even, I would say, an hour into the float, we just kept hearing way off in the distance this weird scream, and it really we laughed about it because it was like a old man and like a gorilla at the same time. It was just really weird. And so we were having kind of little debates back and forth on what it could be, because we do have bobcats in that area and boar, and you know, there's a lot of animals in that area that make some cool noises. So I couldn't really put my finger on anything that it was, so it concerned me just a little bit. And the further we went down the river, the closer this thing got, and we started to get a little bit concerned, and we're like, man, this thing is getting closer, but it was just still far enough off. You can hear the echo. I mean, like, you can tell that it's still probably a mile or so away, and or further. And so came around an embankment on one part of the river, and there's just this big, beautiful beach, enough for all of us kind of set our tents up in privacy, and made a campfire. There was actually already a campfire there, so someone used that beach at one time, and some old beer cans and things just laying in the sand. And so we kind of cleaned up the beach and started getting the wood and everything for the fire. And I went back into this area on the right side of this beach, and there was these 4 skinny trees, and they're pretty close to each other, and someone stacked these trees, I mean, actually pretty nicely, in the 4 trees, and making a wall. And this wall was probably 7 or 8 feet tall, and it was impressive. I mean, I was like, someone really took some time and attention in doing this. And then I noticed on both sides of the trees that were stacked that these trees were twisted, like someone would, you know, take a twig or something and twist it until it comes off the branch. And man, that just blew my mind. I'm like, man, what kind of power would you need, or some type of machine that would grab a tree or do that? So I called everybody over there. They took a look at it, and then obviously we all agreed. Obviously, someone doesn't want us to go back into that area. And there was like a walking path on the other side of this. And so it was weird because, I mean, obviously you could just walk around this wall. So there was no fence or man-made anything. It was like something intentionally did this just to say, I don't need a fence. Yeah.
Kind of like just blocked off the walking path right there, leading out of the camping area, or?
Yeah, leading out of the camping area into the woods. And so we were like, all right, you know, respect whoever's property this is. Now the thing that was kind of crazy was there was no cell phone signal out here. We were so far up, and obviously in 2005 we didn't have really the cell towers or the cell phones we have today. But I mean, it was just all on all our phones. It was X, and there was no docks. Typically in Blackwater River, when there's a property on Blackwater, you got a little dock and things, you can see the house.
Right.
And there was just nothing for hours when we were floating. And so we kind of thought, and we didn't see on the map when we looked it up online, we didn't see on the map any houses in this area, but still I was like, it's probably someone's hunting camp or something like that. We'll leave it alone. And so we settled down, got everything set up, put our tents up and everything. And pulled out, we had a cooler beers and stuff, and pulled that out. And at this point, the screaming noise, the yelling noise was way closer, and it was just so uncomfortable. Like, I'm like, this is weird, you know. But you know, you've been on 100 different camping trips, you hear yells and screams and things like that, howling. It never really comes into your camp. It's very rare if something does do that. And so it was still kind of just writing it off, like, whatever. It's just some animal out there. And I was a little bit nervous, so I only drank a couple beers. My other buddy, he just, downed as many beers as he can, passed out in his tent. He was out he's just an extreme guy. So he was out by like 9:30, something like that. And then it was just my roommate and his girlfriend. And we're sitting around the campfire and just talking. And we just kept getting interrupted for about an hour or so from this scream. And so finally, late at night, 10:30 or something, I'm kind of guessing at the time frame because it was 2005. It's a little further out than my memory goes in those small details.
Right.
I started setting the camp up, putting the cooler where it needs to be so that no animals got the food and all that stuff, and got in our tents. And at this point, it was pretty close and very uncomfortable. Like, I'm like, guys, should we worry about this scream? This thing has to be just a football field away or something. And it was loud. It was just weird. And my buddy, my roommate, and I'm trying not to use his names, but he just was the most skeptical person in the world. We all are Christians and we believe in God and stuff, but I would have to convince him God exists like every other week. Like, this guy was the most skeptical person about everything. And so he's like, nah, don't worry about it. It's just a bear, this or that. And he's never lived in the woods. So I'm like, it's not a bear, man. Unless this thing's broken, it's not a bear.
From the first time that you heard the scream until this point, how much time has passed?
That was probably 1:00 in the afternoon till 10:30 at night. So it's been going on for a really long freaking time.
Yeah, that ain't an animal.
Yeah, no, and that's what I was like, guys, like, you don't understand. Like, animals don't scream that long. Like, this is not normal. And the weird thing that just I've always thought for years is, like, this thing was really, 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 really far away. What attracted it to us? That's what really intrigued me, unless we walked into his territory and it was just by chance that we were in his property and he wasn't happy about it. But like, from how far he was off, which, knowing how big he was, he could probably run a pretty good distance without, or in a short period of time. But that always, and obviously I've had a lot of time to think about this, but it's just interesting that it would do it for that period of time. It would stop for like an hour or so in different intervals, but we weren't paying attention. But then we would just hear it again, but there was breaks in between.
Yeah.
But at this point, we were in our tents, we were laying there. I couldn't sleep because this thing was screaming, and they were all giggling and talking in their tent. And so I was like, man, I'm going to get a bottle of water, and I'm just going to, just try to ease my mind in some way, just go get a drink of water. So I got out of my tent, asked them if they wanted a bottle of water, walked across the beach, and it was about, I don't know, I don't even remember what I said on the video, probably 50 or so yards away from our tent. And I grabbed the 3 bottles of water, and when I stood up, this thing yelled down at me like it was standing above me. And there was like the shrubbery and kind of like some bushes and stuff near our camp, like, or where I was standing. And so that was probably 6 or 7 feet away. And this thing was standing in those bushes, and it screamed down at me. And it, like, I can't describe to you the feeling of this and how absolutely terrifying it was. I thought that was it. Like, this thing was standing next to me, and I just, with everything inside of me, I just took off running towards their tent, got inside of it. And at this point, they're screaming, I'm screaming, like, we're freaking the crap out, trying to figure this out. His girlfriend's crying, like, oh my gosh, it was just horrible. It was like a horror movie. Seriously. And then it was when we heard the footsteps. So we heard the footsteps, and it started walking towards our tent, and the temperature changed. That's when I've experienced a lot of things in my life. We've done a lot of inner city ministry where, one of the things we say in the inner city is darkness doesn't hide. we've seen a lot of weird stuff and things that I can't explain. And so I kind of knew at this point that we were dealing with something that was way deeper than just like an animal or like even just a Bigfoot messing with us. Like there was some spiritual kind of thing in this. And that's what really like put me into a place where I'm like, Lord, I'll never drink again. I'll never. This is it. And like, I'm in your hands. Take the wheel, Jesus. But I did like trying to make sense of that. Your brain, I mean, you just feel like you're going crazy. And this thing's walking towards our tent, and you can feel the footsteps and hear the footsteps. And I'm doing the calculations in my head. I'm like, this thing is heavy. I mean, if anybody's ever walked in that beautiful white sand at Blackwater, I mean, in the area, we have the whitest beaches in the world in Pensacola, Florida, pearly white beaches. And the sand is so soft. It's not like an East Coast sand. And so, man, yeah, to make any type of movement or feel that in the sand, you got to be hundreds of pounds. And it walked up to our tent, and that's when we all just kind of laid down, and his girlfriend buried her head into his arms, and it just started screaming at our tent as loud as it could, smacking it. I mean, trying to push it, but obviously it's a tent and it's staked down, so it's not going anywhere. But he was like pushing the sides of it, and then and I'm just looking up like, what do I do about this? I mean, my roommate's yelling at it to stop, but I don't think that's working. So when the moment where I realized that we were dealing with some type of like Bigfoot is when he pushed his hand down on the tent. And that's when I looked over at my roommate Trey, and I'm like, we're deep into this. Like we're in something here. And he's like, that's a human hand. And I'm like, that's a legitimate 5-fingered human hand. And this thing was huge. Like that thing just could probably close fist a basketball. And the hand was so big. Like it was so big. I mean, just again, our brains like trying to make sense of this, but it just wasn't. And so laying in that tent, it walked around the tent. It would walk away from the tent. It sounded like he was messing with our other buddy's tent. But, of course, he was, like, dead to the world. I don't know how in the world that guy did not wake up. But you can hear his tent moving around. And so we were, like, hoping that he wasn't, like, opening that tent or, like, doing anything to him. It just walked around our campsite, screaming, throwing things. Ripping stuff. It ripped. I just blew my mind at the sheer power that it ripped our cooler in half. It wasn't like it ripped the lid off and like then ripped, and like it was closed, and this thing looked like our cooler. It was a typical igloo cooler. It wasn't some nice one, but it like twisted and ripped this thing in half, and then we found that the next morning, but. And it came back to our tent. At this point, the second time it came to our tent, there was a bush behind our tent, and it was pretty close to our tent. And he just ripped that thing in half. Like you just hear the snap, whoosh, and you can see the side of the tent move because he just ripped the roots right out of the ground. And then started pushing down on our tent again, screaming at our tent. And man, at this point, I felt like I was almost numb to the experience because it was going so long. Like I'm just sitting there, like there's nothing I can do in this situation. And Grant, my buddy or my roommate Trey, and we were along for the ride. And his girlfriend, she was just buried her head the whole time, and crying and screaming and stuff like that. And then I heard it walk across the river. And then you hear just like snapping and breaking for the rest of the night, and him screaming. And he wasn't screaming as loud as he was before. It was like he was getting over it or something. But there's a snapping and screaming. And so I finally fell asleep. I don't know at what time, but woke up and the sun was out. And I'm like, man, it's over. I can't believe like that happened and we lived through it. And so got out of my tent. And, the area was littered with massive footprints. I mean, these things were huge footprints. And I'm like, then kind of like realizing that we did actually have a Bigfoot experience. Like this is that creature, and the temperature was back. That was perfectly normal. And so I knew it wasn't a cold front unless it was some weird, like, couple-hour cold front, which I've never experienced in Florida. But I guess it could be. I actually saw that on one of the comments, and I'm like, hey, you never know. I don't know, but it was some freak event. But trying to rationalize this, and everything's ripped up. And so I've kind of surveyed every area, noticed that my buddy's tent is okay. And then I noticed that they had that damage on the other side, and you can see a significant kind of like damage to the clay on the other side of the embankment. So I'm like, so he did actually go up there. You could tell. I'm going to go check that out. And so I was like getting the canoe into the water, and luckily he didn't do anything to our actual flotation devices, which that made me to believe that there was an intelligence behind it, and the fact that he just didn't want us there. Like, yeah, he didn't want us ever coming back. And so he didn't destroy anything that we needed to move on, which was interesting. But I was getting the canoe in the water. My buddy woke up, and he comes out of the tent just like, what the frick happened? And he's thinking we had a bear attack or something, and there was all this stuff. And I'm like, do you honestly think a bear would make that footprint? And so his brain is going through the same process that we were going through last night, and he's trying to wrap his head around all of this. And I said, jump in the canoe with me. I'm going to go check out that embankment. And he's like, what did this? And I told him I think it was Bigfoot. And obviously he's like, there's no way. And I didn't wake up that entire night. Just blew my mind. But I got in the canoe. We went across the river. We climbed the embankment, and then 6 feet up on these trees were twisted like the trees that were stacked into those 4 trees, and they were twisted and snapped, and some were still attached to the tree, and some were completely snapped off the trees. But there had to have been over a dozen of these things. Like, I mean, the sheer power of doing that even once, but multiple times, was just crazy. And so we're checking it all out. We come to the area where it looked like it kind of moved some stuff and cleared some brush. 2 giant butt prints. Biggest butt prints I've ever seen. Got a laugh out of that. And that was a lot of fun. But saw that. Where he sat down, there was a bush, and it was also ripped in half. And then there was no damage any further. And so we were walking back, and that's when my roommate woke up, and he came out of his tent, and he's like, dude, let's just go. I don't want to be here anymore. Like, he was just completely done. He said, I didn't get any sleep last night. Just trying to help his girlfriend go to sleep, and she wouldn't go to sleep, and she was terrified and all this stuff. So he was completely done. And we're like, no problem. We'll get back over there, and we'll be on our way, and get to the area where you go down the embankment to get the canoe. And then we noticed some more damage to the left, which was directly in front of our campsite. And so we walked over there, and as we were walking over and kind of surveying the damage, it was just like the bottom of this tree just pretty much blew up. Like, just boom, and it was like a half rotted, huge oak tree. Like, had some damage, but it still had some greenery and stuff on it. But this thing, came at us. It wasn't a slow fall either. It was, before you knew it, it was falling on us, and we both dove out of the way. I didn't know my buddy Grant dove out of the way. All I knew was I dove out of the way, and when I turned around, he was gone, and I thought this tree crushed him. So I'm screaming his name, and at the same time, I just feel this thud, and I'm talking this real, the ground, I bounced. It was such a heavy hit on the ground, and then you just hear this boom, 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 and you're feeling the footprints and something running off. And so I'm screaming at this point, Grant, and he's like, man, I'm okay. What was that? And we're trying to climb out of this tree. And we fell between these big branches, and by the grace of God, no one got hurt. But we climb out, and we look over at my roommate, and he is pale white. And this guy's like slightly Italian, like he has kind of a darker complexion. And I'm talking like he's pale white. And he's just standing there, drops his water bottle, turns around and just screaming, we got to go, jumped on his tent with his girlfriend inside of it while trying to disassemble the tent. And he's just freaking out. we're like, Trey, what did you say? You know, it's like, and he's like, don't worry about it. We got to go. You don't understand. We got to go. And I'm like, all right, you know, we'll do it. We got on the other side of the river. We got everything packed. And he's like, if you don't mind, I'm taking the canoe. And man, he literally ran from one beach. If you saw that picture on the actual post, he ran from one beach to the next. Like he would run and then jump in the canoe, and it would push the canoe to the next beach. And then he would just jump out, grab the rope, take off running. And he did that all the way back to the cars, which, I mean, he did another several hour float in probably 2 or 3 hours. And my other buddy and I, we just floated normally, because we're like, I mean, what are we going to do at this point? We're not doing that. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know what that was, but we're not doing that. So yeah, we get back to the house. It had to been probably 2 weeks later. He finally comes to me and he's like, I got to tell you what I saw. I haven't been able to sleep. I see this thing in my dreams. I think about this thing and it makes me like lose concentration on what I'm doing. He goes, I just can't get it out of my head, and I think I need to talk about it. And I'm like, please, like, I'm ready for this. And he said when he got out of the tent, he grabbed a bottle of water and he tilted it up to drink the bottle of water, and he looked up and this thing was sitting in the tree staring at him. And he just like, what the, and he sees it, and he said it was like a dark, like blackish brown fur hair, like long hair. It had like no hair on its face, and it was like this like grayish toned skin on the face, and then there's like huge eyes. And he said the eyes were enormous, like abnormally large eyes, not like human eyes, but these, you know, almost like if you think like alien eyes, you know, aliens have the really big eyes.
Yeah.
Kind of like that. He's just huge eyes. And this thing was just pitch black eyes. You know, you couldn't see anything else, just pitch black eyes. And it stood up and looked at him. And he said at that point, it was almost like it knew everything about him. And it knew, it was like something telepathically, like he's like, dude, that thing was like making me aware that it knew me, kind of thing. Like, I'm like, what? Like, what are you trying? He's trying to explain this to me. I'm like, dude, what in the world are you talking about? He's like, it knew things about me. And then he said it just turned and jumped away from you guys. And he said when this thing launched out of the tree, he goes, it had to been 9 feet tall, 8-9 feet tall, something like that. And it jumped and launched the tree with the amount of force of the body, launched the tree at us. And that's when the bottom of the tree snapped and all that stuff. And then it just landed and took off running. And that's our experience. So that was so terrifying. But yeah, and a little PTSD about it. I was even writing it out, and I had to like stop and like take a break here and there, just writing it, because I'm like thinking all the details again. And just definitely not something I ever want to experience ever again. And we've never been back. That was the last time I actually floated Blackwater River.
I mean, geez, man. I'm assuming that your friend who saw it wasn't like a Bigfoot guy or anything. He not into Bigfoot.
No, if he couldn't see it and feel it, it didn't exist to him. And that was the best way to describe him. He was the most practical, logical person you've ever met in your life. He's such a good guy. Like, we were like brothers. But yeah, no, he wasn't a Bigfoot guy.
I don't say, I'm not saying this to like question your story. I'm just saying that if someone were to imagine Bigfoot or what Bigfoot were like, who had never had any interest in this subject, the giant eyes and telepathic stuff, like, that's not something that you would think of. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
It would just be like, oh yeah, it was this big giant hair covered ape thing that just kind of looked at me and turned and walked off. That's scary, man. That's really scary.
Where I honestly took it, and the last thing that I really kind of summed or I don't know how you want to say it. Like, my conclusion to this was that it was such a terrifying experience that I think a lot of what he thought when he saw it was made up. I think he kind of did that himself. Just my personal opinion. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that. I came face to face with a mountain lion one time, and I swear to you, that thing was looking into my soul. Like,
Yeah.
that was a scary experience, like, and it had this just look in his eyes, like, I'm a alpha predator kind of thing. And so I thought, like, how much was that honestly true, or how much was it him laying in bed at night thinking and mulling this over and coming to that conclusion. So, the only thing that just really honestly freaked me out to a new level was the temperature change. That was something that I even thought about leaving out of the story when I was writing it, where I was like, man, should I even put this? Like, I want to be as factual as possible to the story. And, that part was just, could definitely make people think, oh yeah, this is definitely made up because of how supernatural that is. But I wanted to be as authentic to the story as possible. And I'm honestly like, does the haters really matter in this at this point? And
so no, they don't.
Factually, so
they don't.
Yeah,
I mean, exactly. I'm glad you made that decision. I agree 1,000%. Just putting in every detail how you experienced it.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe the temperature change was related. Maybe it wasn't. We don't really know. I don't think Florida is known for its sudden temporary cold fronts, though. Especially in an area like you're describing, like that would be pretty shielded from the elements, I would assume.
Yeah. And one of the things, obviously, this is very humid in this area. And so to see your breath, it has to be pretty decently cold. And it didn't feel like it was cold enough for us to see our breath, but we can see our breath. And that was freaky. So that was where I was like, okay, this is definitely supernatural versus something natural. Was that one part? Because I think you got to be at least 30 degrees or under in Florida to see your breath. I could be wrong, but I believe I've been here 26 years, and that's typically when is when it gets that cold. But yeah, I don't know. And now I did some research, and that area is a hotbed for Bigfoot sightings. So there's definitely something in that area.
I mean, it makes sense. It would be a hotbed. Having an experience like that, I mean, tearing a cooler in half, man, that's crazy. That the amount of strength. Whenever you first walked out there and it screamed at you from the bushes, was this like next to you or in front of you? Did you see any silhouette or anything?
No, so it was to the right of me, and it's again, it is pitch black out there, like pitch black. The only reason I knew where the cooler was is because there was still little embers in the fire pit, but it's pitch black. There is no light, and we are not near towns, cities. I mean, it is out in the woods. So when it screamed, I did not. I mean, it's just personally me. I didn't dare look up. I didn't want to look up. I just kept my head down, looked straight at the sand, and bolted for their tent. But it was standing to the right of me, and so the fire pit was to the left of me, cooler in front, and about 7 feet away, 6-7 feet away, something like that. There was just kind of tall grass and stuff right there, and he was standing in the grass and screamed down at me. And pretty. I mean, I said it in the story. It was either sitting in a tree or this thing was 9 feet tall. And so then when I got into the tent, of course, the footsteps, I mean, you can tell that it was exactly where it was standing in those bushes. You hear the grass in the bushes moving and crackling, and him walking over to us from where he was standing. So he could have definitely grabbed me at that point. I don't think he wanted to, though.
I mean, something with that kind of power, I don't think the tent was doing you any good. It definitely sounds like a situation where, for whatever reason, it just didn't want you there.
yeah, it was being nice to us.
Which seems kind of strange, really, considering where you were. I mean, a pretty active spot for people to go canoeing and stuff. And like you said, there was a previous campfire and everything right there at that beach. So it's not that there's no human traffic there.
There was, yeah. Unless we were like the second group to do that, and he was sick of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, you guys left a mess here last time.
Yeah, you left a mess. Yeah, and I'm mad about it, and I'm going to take it out on you guys. So, yeah, the whole first day we didn't see a single person out there, and it was on a Saturday. And we didn't see a single person. So, I mean, we went way up there. I definitely would say there's probably people floating that, but not as, the normal amount. Not a lot of people. That's a pretty popular river.
Did you notice any out of ordinary wildlife behavior or anything? I know that's kind of a hard thing to remember that long ago, but did anything stand out where the birds singing and all that sort of thing?
So one thing that actually stood out to me was there was no wildlife, no wildlife. And we didn't see them. We saw maybe a bird or two here and there, but there was typically in that area, you have a good amount of snakes, and you see that a lot. I do believe that they have beavers and otters and, on land, obviously foxes, coyotes, boar, tons and tons and tons of squirrels. Typically you see a decent amount of wildlife out in those areas, especially when there's like not a lot of humans out there. And there was none, just a bird here and there. And but I didn't really pay a lot of attention to that when I was floating, but when I was really going over everything, I asked my buddy, and I was like, did you see any wildlife when you were floating down the river? And he's like, honestly, I didn't see any at all. And I'm like, dude, I wonder if even the wildlife knew.
Yeah.
And we also have deer. I mean, we have buck and doe and all that stuff out there, but there was just nothing.
How deep was the water and the width of the river where your camp was?
We were in an area where the deepest point is about 8 feet. And then how big is that river? I mean, I'm trying to think of yardage or footage. I would say at that point, it was probably 50-ish feet wide or something. It's not a big, it's more of a snake river. It's not a big, crazy wide river. In some points it really narrows down, but I think the largest areas are probably 100 to 200 feet wide. Not very big.
You mentioned hearing it cross the river. I mean, not swimming, I assume. It was walking across the river.
Oh yeah. So that was a big part of it. So when I looked down in the water, when we were in the canoe, 8 feet down were footprints. And we both saw that. And he's like, dude, how big or how heavy you would have to be to walk across this river and to make footprints in the sand. I mean, and then they're still there. I mean, this is moving water. Obviously it's not really fast. It's a good floating river, like a current, like a lazy river. But man, to leave a footprint in the sand and it still be there the next morning, that's some heavy stuff.
Yeah. Florida has those crystal clear rivers too. That would have had to have been a crazy experience, man. If you had to guess, I mean, I assume you didn't measure any of the footprints that you saw, but how big were they?
So I would say at least it would be over a 20 shoe size.
Jeez.
I mean, at least. I mean, we're pretty tall people in my family. I mean, my brother's 6'6" and my dad's 6'6", and I'm 6'1". My brother has 13 size shoe. It's 13 and a half or something. And, I've been around a lot of big shoes, and this thing, these were huge. I mean, obviously the foot, I don't think would even be able to fit in a shoe because of how wide it was too. So this thing was big. I mean, you can tell just pure muscle. Just a huge freaking foot. And just big one, big foot. I remember putting my foot into it and I put my toes where his toes were, and then my foot in it. My heel was still on the front part of his foot. So imagine kind of how big that is.
Wow.
So it might have been over 9 feet tall. I mean, this thing had to have been huge.
Yeah. The tree wall structure that you saw whenever you first arrived, you talked about the other trees being stacked up.
Yeah.
Were they just like leaning against the trees, or were they like woven through them?
So they were stacked 3 deep. So that the trees, these 4 trees were pretty, you got like a 3 tree distance between each other. And so he stacked 3 trees down on the ground and then just started stacking them on top of each other. And so the trees kind of widened at the top, and these trees were stacked from 3 all the way up to, like stacked 6 or 7 wide. But it went about 7 feet high, like that. It was over my head for sure, but it wasn't woven through. They were just stacked on top of each other in a straight line.
And then the trees on the ends were the ones that were twisted and broken over.
Yeah. On both sides of those trees that were stacked, they were twisted off. I mean, just crazy. Crazy.
Yeah, that's one of the things. And I know people, skeptics that think this is all crazy stuff, which I understand. I've been there, but they're like, oh, well, wind can do that, snow can do that. Yeah, I know, man. But whenever you're standing there looking at something that is very clearly something grabbed it with a hand and twisted it, and you're just like,
twisted it, yeah.
What? I mean, I can't do that with a really small tree.
The amount of force you would have to do that. I mean, that wrist strength. Yeah, I mean, your hand. You do the math. I mean, it's just crazy. But one thing I absolutely love is the fact that people do have the right to be skeptic. You do have the right to question, and you'd be silly not to question, but I do believe that we barely know 30% of what's going on this planet and what we truly live in. There's so much more mystery out there, but it's definitely intriguing.
So after this happened, you get back home. Did you tell your family?
Oh, no. We waited a while. We all kind of had a powwow. We're like, all right, obviously we're all associated in this story, in this experience. How do we want to do this? And we all kind of agreed just to wait a little bit, try to really hone down what's happened, because in the moment, your brain, you'll see so many things. Just really getting that factual story down. And so we all sat down and wrote out those stories, and then came together and like looked at each one of our stories and solidified literally really what happened. And then at that point, we're like, all right, use your discretion. I want to be anonymous. I mean, over the years, they've wanted us to stay anonymous, because I asked before, I'm like, what would you guys think about sharing our story on this? And they still obviously all have families, and they don't want to be written as crazy. But I'm looking at the state of the world today and how chaotic it is, and I'm like, this is a perfect time to come out with this story. Tell everybody my Bigfoot story.
Yeah, I can just slide this one right out there, and nobody will even notice.
No one even noticed.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you decided to come forward and share it. It's very interesting. It actually has quite a bit of information that adds in a few more pieces to the puzzle, I think. Yeah.
We were able to find a significant amount of evidence in other stories correlating to ours, and that's what really gave us, confidently gave us the ability to say this was a Bigfoot experience. But a lot of the experiences that we had, besides the temperature change, was a lot in that Washington State area. And when there was tons of sightings out there, so we were able to watch some videos on that. But yeah, definitely go down in history as the strangest experience of my life. Yeah. So.
Have you ever experienced anything paranormal or UFOs or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, I did with my mom one time in Oregon, and the only other experience we had with these things, but I was the paper boy. I think I was, I don't know, 10 or 11 or something like that. But it was an early morning. The sun was coming up, and we stopped, and there was this, it was in Sisters, Oregon. There was these Three Sisters mountains, and when the sun's rising, man, it's one of the most breathtaking things you ever see in your life. And so we stopped, and we're watching the sunset. We're like, man, that's gorgeous. And we look over, and like almost directly behind us were these clouds, and they were red. And I'm like, yeah, look, it's beautiful. It's like shining on those clouds. And then we realized that was like orangish, normal like sunrise color, and this was like a blood red in this cloud. We were like, what the heck? And then it started pulsating, and it like moved to another cloud, and that's when we jumped in our car and drove off. We were like, no, we're not. It was like, the funny thing was, it was over cows. It was like a cow pasture. So, but did some research, and we actually found in a book, someone else, it was like some UFO book, and someone was talking about a red light, and it transferred from one cloud to the next. But that's the only other experience I've had with like an alien like thing. And we had some really creepy things happen in a house that we rented in Montana, but nothing too crazy. It's just kind of like footprints or footsteps in this house. It's the weirdest thing. It's old 1800s house, and we every once in a while you would just hear something run across the living room floor, and there was like no one in there. And you're like, yeah, that's creepy.
Yeah, that'll do it. I've been in a situation like that before. Definitely creepy.
Yeah. Oh, but that house, the people that owned it went senile and died in the house. And so when they cleaned the house up and everything, the daughter of the couple that went crazy and died in the house rented the house to us. And that's when just weird, strange things. That house just was uncomfortable. Not cool.
So with the temperature change, and like you said, there's strange things that you experience, especially things of an evil nature sometimes, what we perceive as evil from a Christian standpoint. What are your thoughts about this situation? Do you think Bigfoot is something natural? Do you think it's something demonic? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I definitely think it's something demonic. Obviously, this is all hearsay, kind of theory, my theory, not factual, but it's like the feeling I had when it was doing what it was doing, and when it was in the area, it was pure fear, and not like my fear, but there was just like a presence of fear. I don't know if you kind of get what I'm saying, but it was like just this feeling like you're like, this is not okay. This is not a godly thing. This is not something just like a normal animal. Like there's a level of fear and evil to it. And I do believe personally that Bigfoot is a interdimensional being. If that was like some type of creature that fell when the angels fell in heaven and all these things, I have no idea. But I do believe it is a interdimensional being, and that's why we don't have full skeletons of these things and stuff like that. Like it's rare to find any type of remains of these, but and then it does have the ability to I guess manufacture supernatural strength and different features and stuff like that. Personally, that's what I believe, and that's why it had such strength the way it did. The amount of muscle you would need to do something like that. Personally, I just think there was muscle and some type of supernatural involvement in it.
That's what I tell people. It's easy to sit here and hear a story, and like you said, skepticism is a good thing, and asking questions is a good thing. But the person that knows best is the person that experienced it. And from my perception of the story, while we don't know the reason for the temperature change, it sounds like you feel that it was definitely connected to the event. And
Yeah.
Typically, temperature changes like that are connected to paranormal or supernatural events. I mean, that's a very common thing for paranormal investigators to experience, and that's a very common aspect of demonic activity. And that's, one of the reasons I really wanted to get you on and hear this story firsthand, because that is an aspect that I had never heard before in relation to Bigfoot.
Yeah, definitely interesting.
Isaiah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's one for the ages. If you've had your own encounter with Bigfoot or something else you can't explain, shoot me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to my social media, past episodes, merchandise, everything you need all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.